You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio. Welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast, where it's all about Black empowerment. Our show focuses on Black news and entertainment, arts, science, economics, history, people, and strategies that uplift, empower, and motivate Africans within the diaspora. And now, your host, whose favorite color is black, Goku.
Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I'm your host, Koku. Today's show, before we get into today's show, let me give the customary free biz shout out. Free business shout out goes to Stephanie Renee's Salon, located at 1614 West Main Street in Kalamazoo, Michigan. The zip code there is 49006. You can reach Stephanie Renee's Salon at 269-459-6535. That's 269-459-6535. They're conveniently located inside Cali Beauty. Next up is amymarie.maven.com. That's AMYMARIE.MAYVENN.com. They also deal in natural hair care products. Their mission is to provide high-quality products with unparalleled shopping experience, world-class technology and hair care products, etc. You can find them at amymarie.maven.com. Next up is Melanated Conscious Society. You heard me talking to Kepra L on my podcast several weeks back. You could find them at www.melanatedconscioussociety.com. melanatedconscioussociety.com is a mentor Black community empowerment organization in Jacksonville, Florida. Make sure to follow them on all social media platforms. And if you have a skill or talent related to marketing, like social media marketing or graphics or whatever you can do, or reach out to them and offer your assistance. It's for a good cause. It's organizing for our people. Lastly, Glennae Davis on Twitter. She could be reached at GLENNAERN@gmail.com. I'll just read what she sent me. She said, "Hello, thanks for your reply. I'm Glennae Davis, an LA-based registered nurse, author of a critically acclaimed memoir, Yet Here I Stand, creator and chief nurse of Nave's Vision, a healthcare media empire where we provide the healthcare education and planning to bridge the gaps of knowledge between discriminated, disadvantaged people facing employment discrimination and the healthcare industry, resulting in having a strategic plan with the medical support they need to no longer be victimized, merchandised, or marginalized by the system." I currently have 2 products available for your listeners. Number 1 is the memoir, and number 2, a free health checklist. So guys, if you're listening, make sure reach out to Glennae Davis. Once again, her email address is GLENNAERN@gmail.com. Also, I want you guys to take a listen to this.
Greetings, Bitter Medicine supporters. It's Caramel Yogi, aka Tamika, the creator of Victorious Ones LLC, where we help single parents find peace and harmony through meditation and vinyasa yoga. Visit Caramel Yogi on IG or send an email to caramelyogi@gmail.com. CARAMELYOGI. We will help you stay on your path of peace and harmony.
Also, I want you guys to take a listen to this.
Greetings, family! In case you didn't know, the Bitter Medicine Podcast hosts an online book club. Every month, we will select a book to inspire the Bitter Medicine Podcast listening audience to read along together. At the end of the month, we will host a call-in show book discussion live on YouTube. This is a great dynamic way for readers to not only enjoy a book, but also have others to bounce ideas off of. It's been said that if you want to hide anything from Black people, put it in a book. Do not allow this to be true anymore. Head over to www.bittermedicineblogs.com and subscribe to our newsletter for important updates. Do that today. Join our reading collective today and empower yourselves, your family, and your community. Peace.
Yes, indeed. Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. This is your host, Coco, as usual. Today we have an interesting show. You know, if you're a listener of the show, you know that I've interviewed several people who are organizers in the community. And all I ask for you to do is to listen to their story and ask them, how can you help in any way that you can. And today is no different. I have Wahida on the line with me today. Wahida, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Wahida, you reached out because you want to talk about the Afrocentricity International, I guess the Philadelphia chapter of Afrocentricity International. Afrocentricity International was created in 2011 by Dr. Molefe Asante and Dr. Ama Mazama, and the Philadelphia chapter launched its African Heritage and Cultural Preservation Fund on November 25th of this year. And the idea is to reclaim your heritage. It's actually a campaign, the Reclaim Your Heritage campaign. So the Afrocentricity International supports the economic, cultural, and educational elevation of African people in an effort to create cultural consciousness. Wahida, you want to come on today to further discuss the initiative, and now is the opportunities. First of all, let me ask you to speak about who you are for the listeners to understand who we're speaking to.
Yes, hi. Thank you. First of all, thanks so much for opening up your platform to allow me to come and speak on here a little bit about this. We appreciate everything you do in the community and, you know, the work that you do, reaching out with people, connecting with people, and sharing information. My name, again, as you said, is Wahida. I am the Vice President of Communications for our chapter in Philadelphia. I have a background in communications from Temple University. I'm a mother, an organizer. And one of the things that I did want to clarify, our 4 pillars in Afrocentricity International is political, intellectual, economic, and spiritual. So those 4 pillars are what we work through to increase the consciousness of everyone in our community. And as Dr. Asante always says, consciousness precedes unity. So the big goal is for us to come together to really make moves and begin initiatives and support each other and begin building a global network. That's really the aim of us, our organization, is to build a global network with which we can support institutions that we will direct and build and grow. And, you know, do the work out of those institutions that are necessary. As we all know, you can go through the list of institutions right now that are oppressive to us, that are, suppressing our means to come together to do work that's necessary, misdirecting and misguiding us, misorienting us from, the banks to the police to schools to you name it. And so the importance, I think, of institution building is imperative. I think those of us in the community who are aware of what's going on would definitely agree with that. So for me, I came into Afrocentricity International just connecting with like-minded people. Actually, it was through Twitter, believe it or not. And people in the area of Philadelphia, you end up, I think, after being on social media for long enough, especially as a conscious person, you start to, there's a niche of people that you start following, that start following you, that you communicate with. And eventually, if you're willing to go and do the work, there are opportunities to go somewhere and sit with like-minded people and build and plan in person, face-to-face, eye-to-eye, voice-to-voice, if you are willing to do that. And I was. So I went to discuss with the people that I connected with and joined the organization. For me, it was a no-brainer. And for me, there's nothing besides supporting my family. There's nothing else that I really need to be doing for what I believe is our progeny, to create a better situation for them and to create a better situation for myself when I come back in the future. So for me, that's how I got involved with the organization. And that's, just a little bit about the 4 pillars of where we're working and what we're doing.
Can you repeat for me and the listeners, what are the 4 pillars again?
The 4 pillars: political, intellectual, or educational, economic, and spiritual. And that is in no particular order of importance.
Okay, great. So, you are a student at Temple University?
No, I'm an alumni at Temple.
Oh, you're an alumni. Okay.
Yeah, I graduated years ago.
Okay. So
yeah. But they have a strong program, a strong anthropology program. They did try to, axe that years ago, but they were able to continue on and redevelop the program. Dr. Malefi and Dr. Asante, and Dr. Azama are they are very much involved in the Department of Africology there at Temple University. And so they've been working together for many years. And that's how, they recognize that through their travels and through other work that they've done, that there was a vacuum in a global network. There's a void in this global network that we just aren't providing. And so they decided to model this organization after Marcus Garvey's UNIA.
Right.
As you know, back in the 20s, at the height of his organization, there were millions of members across the world.
Yeah.
And that was in the early, 20th century. So fast forward to today, to see that that's not available and doesn't exist anymore. For them was very much the motivation that was needed to come together to build something like this and get the ball rolling again.
Well, I think most people will agree that what happened between the 1920s and almost 2020 now is that the oppressors stepped up their game and we didn't, and a lot of confusion has been entered into our communities, and so we can't get organized like we once were able to. A part of that is even civil rights plays a part in that confusion as well. So here we are now, trying to rebuild what was once built, and that's a shame that we've allowed ourselves to be, duped like that and put into this situation. Wahida,
absolutely.
You joined the AI, the Afrocentricity International, right?
Yes.
And you had a chance to fellowship with Dr. Asante and Mazama. How has that been to be in the presence of people like that?
Well, I got to say, it's an honor because I came from, my regular working, taking care of my children, straight into, sitting next to these people who are internationally well known in the conscious community. And you have, for example, there are students who, go to Temple who I guess, would really love to be in a position where they're closer to these scholars and very powerful. They just carry a certain energy about them, and they move about. They're very personal, down-to-earth people. You can stop and talk to them, but they are very busy, of course. So I went from just skipping all of that to just be working right next to them. And I felt for me, it was really an honor. It was really an honor to be in the Molefi Kete Asante Institute. And their doors are open for anyone to come into the lectures, come into the general membership meetings that we have every first and third Sunday of every month. And then on the last Sunday of every month, we have what we call a Circle of Life, and that's where we explore some more African spirituality and discuss topics surrounding spiritual systems or spiritual questions and topics. So, again, like going into that building and realizing, hey, this is an institution where we can come in here and discuss all the ailments. We can discuss solutions. We can build, we can plan, we can strategize without any outside influence judging or holding you down or holding you back. It feels like that is the place where I feel the most free, if I can be completely honest. Nice. When I walk in there, I can be exactly who I am without, we all go to our jobs or whatever it is. You have to smile. You have to deal with certain things. Mm-hmm. You may have to let things slide. Yeah. You have to keep your mouth shut. You may say things and get in trouble for it or whatever. But there, I can go there and we could talk about some things you just can't say anywhere else. And it feels good to be in the presence of people like that. And it feels good to be in the presence of an institution that is very specifically in existence for the benefit of me, myself, and people like me and others in our community to come and learn and elevate our consciousness. So for me, I will say it's definitely an honor and it's a privilege. But as far as Dr. Molefi and Dr. Asante, they are very down to earth, personable people, and they don't walk around like they're untouchable or anything like that.
I can imagine Dr. Molefi is very busy. I actually emailed him. It was funny that this opportunity to speak to you came up because I emailed him maybe 2 weeks ago about potentially, about appearing on the podcast. I wanted to talk to him about African spirituality. And, I understand, but I didn't get a response from him. I will try again, though, after this broadcast. I'll try again. So I imagine he's very busy. But something you said really piqued my interest just now. You said two things. You said that, anyone was welcome to come to the meetings, etc. And that led me to start a question in my mind. Okay, if anyone is able to come, who's anyone really? And I'll give you some background as to why that stood out to me. A couple of weeks ago, at the beginning of the fall semester, I went to an event held by a black organization here in Brooklyn. And there was a procession through the streets. And I looked next to me, and there's a white woman with a Pan-African flag. And I'm like, what's she doing here?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, why do we always do these things and we let any and everybody outside of our own selves, outside of our community? Why do we let these folks in? I mean, if you go back and you look at...
I completely understand what you're saying and where you're going with that. But let me just be clear to say that we mean, anyone is welcome. Not that those particular folks are maybe welcome, but we're a growing we're a growing organization. So we're looking for like-minded people to come in. Those are who are, that we're looking for and are welcome to come. Right. Anybody who's typically dealing with us or following us or people we're connected to, at this stage in the game, they're probably not going to be coming unless they're very much interested in what we're talking about and part of the conscious community and want to be, of service and do their part and learn more and be able to build. So, I guess at a certain point where when we do reach those levels, there will be other people coming and we'll have other methods in place to sort of mitigate those issues that may occur. But no matter how you look at it, those problems, those sort of infiltrations are always going to occur. And that's one of the things that we are strategizing in our organization already because we're aware of its inevitability. But I just want to be clear, when we say anyone's welcome, we're talking about like-minded people who are conscious. That's who we're looking to bring in, not just any old body. It's not like if a white person comes to the door and walks in, we're going to, stop them and strap them up and pat them down and tell them they have to leave. It's not really that kind of thing at the moment. Don't forget, at the Institute, they have other lectures. Many different people come to those lectures every Sunday, weekly. And people come in who hear the lectures. Sometimes there's students from their departments. Every once in a while, it might be a white person, but that's not something that we're doing just yet. But I do understand your concern, and trust me when I say that is something that we're also concerned with and thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not at all trying to dictate for you guys what you guys are doing. I'm just saying, I think we have to learn to find solutions for our problems without the interference of others. And, in fact, in the Bitter Medicine Book Club, which you probably heard the commercial for at the start of the show, last week we did a book review on Kwame Ture and Charles Hamilton's Black Power, The Politics of Liberation. And one of the things that is repeated throughout that text is you have to close ranks. You have to close ranks. And so that's my only thing. Like when I went to that organization's march and I saw that, it just reminded me of how many other organizations in recent decades were infiltrated and the groups destroyed from allowing, be it some Japanese guy for the Black Panthers to be involved, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my only
Absolutely.
concern. That's my only
Absolutely.
concern.
I think there's there are different levels in which that sort of thing is closed. So let's take my organization, for example. Our general meetings are where we have topical discussions aimed at drawing something substantial from the discussion in which we can learn or implement, or some kind of program we may be able to devise and plug into our programs that is open to the people who want to come and join our organization and be like-minded. And work towards solutions. Now, we also have, obviously, our own meetings with our leadership. Okay. So there are levels to which, you know what I mean? There are many levels to which a person's going to sort of come in. But again, even at that very beginning stage, let's say somebody like that, Doug, we haven't had that issue yet.
Okay.
But let's say somebody did come in. Obviously, we're all side-eyeing that, and our radar is up.
Right.
And so that at that point, we would then more or less begin to put those particular walls up. But there has to be, because the thing is, at the end of the day, it could be, and I say this all the time, it could be the blackest person walking in, and they can be the biggest coon undercover. They can be the most, it could be an inside person who's working with our oppressors.
Yes.
It can be whomever. So you really don't know. When you say close ranks, I want people to understand that has to involve more than just, this color and skin of the person walking in.
So reclaim your heritage. Reclaim your heritage. Tell us what that should mean to us when we hear that.
Yeah, so what that should mean is that we want, I don't want to say we want. What that should mean to people is running in line with the idea of Sankofa.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to the source of our energy, the source of our power, source of our spirit, reclaiming our culture, reclaiming our customs, reclaiming our traditions. That means really identifying and lining up with our ancestors, putting them back into the fold of the way we think and operate, really centering them in our spiritual practice. It can mean many different things depending on the person. But ultimately what we want to do is to return back to our traditional ways in terms of seeing them as valuable, seeing them as worthy, seeing ourselves and the practices that our ancestors have followed for thousands of years and came to these particular traditions, and really seeing a fundamental purpose in these practices that define us. So I think that from a spiritual perspective, and that's one of the pillars, because as many scholars and revolutionaries will teach us, our spirit, we're never going to free ourselves until we are spiritually free, right? Mm-hmm. And that, when you look at history, you look at the Haitian Revolution, you look at the Mau Mau, you look at many different revolutions. A lot of it was drawn from some sort of spiritual, first of all, consciousness, right? Mm-hmm. Unity when they came together, and that sparked and motivated, sort of was the springboard, that a catalyst to what occurred. And that's the type of energy we need to return back to and draw from. That's the type of energy that they cut off from us. And we know from history, the colonizers said, you know what? These people have a particular sense of self that creates this opposition to what we want them to do. They just will not conform to what we're asking them, what we're requiring them to do. So they would kill off the parents, train up the children in their new Christian, whatever ways. They knew that our spiritual practices anchored us and allowed us to see through, the garbage that they were trying to force on us. Mm-hmm. Same thing with in the Americas. Same story, right? They wouldn't even, let us practice. They wouldn't let us practice our religions here. They even stopped you from using the drum so that you could, and we know why. We understand why. It comes from a spiritual root, right? Mm-hmm. Of unity and that rhythm, that harmony that brings people together comes from that spiritual component. And there's no denying that. If they could identify that, we can identify that. And we can say this is something that we need to practice and return to, and see how important it is to our way of life, and see how the role that it's going to play in eventually overcoming our obstacles that we have. So I think for me, reclaim your heritage means to go back, and that falls in line with that concept of Sankofa. Go back, and that's where you're going to find your answers. And that's where we're going to find a lot of our unity, find our strength and rejuvenation.
But just to be clear for the listeners, we're going back, and we're going back to Africa, essentially, right? We're going back to our African roots, right?
Right.
Yeah, because I just wanted to be clear about that, because that was kind of the elephant in the room. It's Sankofa, we're going back, but specifically we need to go back to being our African selves.
Yeah, I mean... And that is the elephant in the room. That's constantly the issue, when you talk to U.S. Americans and some island Americans. There's always this enmity between them and Africa. And I don't want to say that that's okay. It's not okay. But we understand why it's there. And that's something that we will have to work through, so that we can get us all on the same page. Many of us are on that page, right? We think in and out of Africanness. And that's that Afrocentric paradigm that, Dr. Asante pretty much pioneered, that paradigm of thinking in terms of Africanness and through the lens of an African scope. A lot of people can't do that yet because some people don't even believe they're African. And then you have these different movements coming about. You have people who have not studied history. They don't see the value in themselves connecting themselves to Africa, right? And that goes again into part of the pillars, the intellectual pillar of education. People need to be re-educated and reoriented. If you go back from maybe the 90s, 80s, and backward, most people understood they were African in America, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It wasn't something that was questioned. It wasn't something, there wasn't any confusion about that. But somewhere along the way, you started having people being disgusted with their African heritage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't be, if you have a self-hate so much so that you don't even like where your ancestors are from, what does that say about you? That is self-hate at its finest, at its absolute finest. Before you get into brushing your hair or, you know what I mean, or relaxing your hair, all these other things that we bleaching, all these other things that we associate with self-hate, it would stem from this root of disliking your African heritage. And so reclaiming your heritage, going back to the last question, is part of that. Loving yourself, loving your ancestors, loving where you're from, you know what I mean? Feeling honored and proud. Because we have this whole thing about, we do have this new thing now where it's, I'm black and I'm proud. Like we have a lot of women doing the natural hair thing, really just loving themselves, right? And so we're starting to go back a little bit in different ways. But at the end of the day, you're right. The Sankofa specifically is back to Africa. And once we get, a critical mass of people who accept that and understand that, then you'll have a critical mass of people who hopefully will be willing to then do the work to support all of what that comes with that. Once you reclaim your heritage, then you're going to say, I want to be a good Samaritan, right? You want to take part in being a good citizen of what you feel like is this new heritage you claim. And that means doing the things that a good citizen does, right? To partake in the maintenance of that community or that nation or that heritage that you want to be, you've now reclaimed. And that includes things like going and doing work, donating to organizations, helping to support and build institutions that are for you, right? You can't do any of that if you don't even care about Africanness.
Yep.
If you don't care, if you don't even see yourself as African, you're not going to do any of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really the root of it. And I think for me, that spiritual component is really always the beginning of all of that. And it coupled with those other things, right? You have to have particular politics involved. You have to have certain kind of intellectual, you have to have reached a certain intellectual level about these things, right? You have to believe in the economics of us supporting each other. So that's where those pillars comes in. They all interplay with each other. But I always feel like the root of it all is there's a particular spiritual component that pushes the other ones. So
one of the issues that a group like yours will see, and probably already sees somewhat, but is going to be increasingly problematic. The problem with black society is we tend to have these talking heads. People who are doing stuff similar to what I'm doing, but instead of talking about Sankofa type movements and returning to Africa, be it economically, spiritually, intellectually, or politically, you have a lot of the talking heads in Black America society who are talking about being American descendants of slaves, or the ADOS grouping. And so what's happening now is that because of these guys are non-intellectuals, really, a lot of them, but they have, charisma or whatever, and they could speak to large numbers of people. They're destroying the concept of Pan-Africanism from the American side. And that's going to be a challenge for you guys, hopefully when you guys have no problems meeting and overcoming. But that's going to be a challenge now, because nowadays, like you said, I came to America in the mid-'90s, exactly in the middle of the 90s. I came here to go to college. And I can remember for sure in the 90s and stuff, and even if you watched American television in the 80s or whatever, you knew that black folks identify with Africa, particularly Kemet. But somewhere in the 2000s here, in the last decade or so, there's been this anti-African narrative that's going on. And this is why it's refreshing to see what you guys are doing in Philadelphia. But it's also troubling to see what these other folks are doing to turn the black community's collective consciousness away from Africa and only into thinking of itself here in America. I'm always curious why it's so easy to get certain black folks sometimes to say forget Africans from Africa, from the continent, or forget these Africans from the Caribbean, which is where I'm from, the Caribbean. So it's always interesting to see that there's some pushback by groups like yours. But I also just want to be clear and point out that you're going to have that problem with those who just want to identify as American, as Native Black, as Indigenous. In fact, there's this movement of Black folks in America saying that they were the Native Americans, et cetera, et cetera. Do you guys have an understanding of that, and do you have an idea how you want to deal with that?
Yeah, you opened up a big can there, Kuku.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me just start by saying, yes, it has come up already, very quickly. That is often the elephant in the room when we're having this discussion. Before, I would like to get into more about the fund and the actual institute. But before I do that, we do need to address this. It all kind of ties in, right?
Yes,
because
it does. Mm-hmm.
People would immediately say, well, why should we have this institute in Africa?
Right.
Which is, why not here? And so it's hard to explain to people very simply that we need to have a footprint that begins in Africa. We need to have an institution there, and we have a stronghold right there so that we can, just as a starting point, because the next institute we've already decided will be in Haiti or Haiti.
Nice.
After that, so we're moving, ultimately, MC, sometimes people can't see far enough ahead, and that's okay. We have to slowly bring them to that. There will be an institute everywhere. That is why it's a global network. We're going to have them in America very shortly. But you see how in America it's very problematic. People are very confused.
Yes.
Many people in Haiti are not confused. Many people in Africa are not confused. As far as that they are African, right? Mm-hmm. Not necessarily saying they aren't confused in many other ways. Right. But that's where we come in to help rebuild and reorient and help people to increase their consciousness. But going back, these movements that are very are a hindrance to the Pan-Africanism. That's what it is. It's a hindrance. It's one of those little drops of antagonism to the greater picture. Mm-hmm. That for whatever reason, it's very clear that the disparity between it always comes down to Americans, African Americans, and Africans. That's usually where you see the discussion, right? But to be clear, that can be anyone in the diaspora and anyone in continental Africa. But usually in America, we hear AAs versus continental Africans. And in that discussion, they say, well, when I was growing up, you called me a booty scratcher. You don't like us. You think we're this and that. And then the African Americans say, you come over here, you think you're better than us and smarter than us. You get all these opportunities and you get this and that. And immediately there's always this clash. And some people work it out. A lot of people don't.
Yeah.
I feel like people need to recognize very simply that if we want to, from a global perspective, if we want to stop being at the bottom of the totem pole every single place we go, from a global perspective, we have to come together internationally. It's okay and people call it tribalism, which I don't like that term, but I don't like the idea of saying we need to rid ourselves of tribalism, because first and foremost, that's a very reductionist, right? They weren't called tribes. These were whole nations of people, from the continent to everyone in the diaspora. You're talking about nations of people. So to reduce them to just tribe, battles is very reductionist to me, first of all. Second of all, even with those differences, they were able to get along. Even with our differences, you hear the I don't see color argument and blah, blah. No, we are different.
Yeah.
That's fine. But what matters is how do we celebrate our differences? I like food from different cultures. I like African American food. I like island food. I like African food. I'm not going to sit here and say we need to get rid of all of our differences. And that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is we can all enjoy each other's food and feel proud about our different cultures separately. And same thing when you're talking about our nations. We can work together even if we're very different. That's okay. If you look at every other race or ethnicity, they can come together despite their differences. The Europeans did it when they went and piecemealed all parts of Africa and separated it among themselves. They were all over the world. They imperialized every part of the world. And so they had representatives of their whiteness all over the place, even though some were French, some were British, right? Same thing think about when you go to Chinatown, right? Chinatown doesn't mean just Chinese. There's Vietnamese restaurants there, there's Korean spots there, and so forth.
Yep.
They're okay with coming together when it comes to certain things, even with their differences. Even as much as sometimes, Japanese and Chinese hate each other. But there's a commonality among them that they accept. And for whatever reason, when you come to Black Africans, all of a sudden, we can't accept this commonality to the point where they're saying they're not even African anymore.
Yeah.
And it comes from a self-hatred, and it comes from their experiences when they grew up. They may have had negative experiences that now influence their position currently, where no, that's not me. That's not where my ancestors are from. I'm not a part of that continent. I don't want to be a part of that continent. I have my own continent here. And they'll come up with, it's a dissonance, right? And when you have a dissonance, you have to fill in on some side for you to feel okay. So if you have two opposing thoughts or ideas, they have to excuse one of them the side that they want to, so that they can be at peace. And so what they said is, well, that's not who I am. Yeah. I'm not African.
Yeah.
And for them, that is enough to then say, I don't want to be a part of any kind of global Pan-African movement to free myself. And the silly thing about it is, I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know what they think they're going to be able to do by themselves.
Right.
Did the Europeans piecemeal? Did Britain go and get all of Africa by itself? No. China, even take China. China from their country weren't able to do necessarily everything. They had people all over the place, right? Mm-hmm. Same thing. You're creating this economic footprint. You have Chinese here in America. You have Chinese everywhere. And they were able to create an economic. So I think that's what I was watching a lecture. Dr. Amos Wilson was talking about this economic footprint, right? Mm-hmm. And he's saying that all these other races and ethnicities did this. And that's what we need to do. The funny thing is we already have Black people everywhere, and we don't even use that to our advantage. We have Black African people in every country in the world, pretty much. Maybe except the coldest of places, right? But besides that, we have Black people. Basically, we have representatives We have, let's call them soldiers everywhere in the world, but there's no common instruction on what to do. We're just running around with our chickens, like chickens with our heads cut off, because we don't think we're from Africa.
Right.
And we speak every language, right? Every language there is, Black people are speaking it. And it's besides America, most of them speak multiple languages. We're kind of, we're spoiled here in America. We only speak English for the majority. And there's reasons for that too. But going back to the point about the Americans and the descendants of slave movements and things like that, I don't think they understand the end game. It doesn't even, from a strategic position, make sense to disunify from a greater purpose.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to be able to do a whole lot just by themselves from a global standpoint. Because you have a global world that unanimously hates Black African people and will pillage and, rape and do whatever they need to do to get our resources and take from us and enslave us and oppress us however possible.
Yeah.
So it doesn't even strategically make sense in that aspect. So I don't see how, for me, I have to side eye someone who's not thinking strategically about how to free ourselves and themselves as a whole.
Yes.
So
and just a quick message to anyone who might be listening who is one of the the American descendant of slave movement folks. The thing that most of your talking heads are pushing for is so that you could receive the benefits that white folks supposedly allotted to you in America. That's your argument. Your argument is that Caribbeans and Africans come here and take what white folks had set aside for you folks. That's not strategic. That's nothing. That's you just fighting for crumbs, really, fighting for scraps. So to take that course of wanting to fight for, so-called liberation, but from your standpoint as Americans, Africans and Americans, or Blacks in America, just so that you could get whatever it is white folks throw down to you is just ridiculous. There's a bigger picture. There's a bigger end game. And on the other side of this commercial break, we're going to talk to Wahida about the fund and what you can do to help it. Okay, Wahida, we will take a quick commercial break, and on the other side, we'll discuss that, okay?
Sounds great.
Okay.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the Pro-Black Perspective, where Black problems are addressed with Black solutions. Black people face one problem. The problem of ignorance. This is why those who opposed us stole us from our parents, disconnected us from our continent, and enforced on us illiteracy. But now the ignorance is self-inflicted. We send our children to their machines. We detach ourselves from our motherland, and we don't read meaningful literature. Consciousness is a series of stages. The sooner we get to one, the sooner we are ready for the higher. The Pro-Black Compendium accelerates the beginner to the advanced and provides for the advanced an unparalleled breadth. This is the sort of book your enemies do not want you to read, but our ancestors would insist you read twice. Peace Seeker, this is Oni from the Pro-Black Perspective, and we need power. Power will not be handed to us. We need to build power. But in order to build power, we need a power blueprint. You need to study the best blueprints available. You have Gardens. You have Wilsons. You have Williams. You have mine. Now, you'll have Cooks. Carlos A. Cooks was Garvey's best student, the greatest mind in the world from 1940 to 1966. Yes, the greatest. Yet Whitey doesn't want you to read his blueprint. Cook's blueprint isn't religious. Cook's isn't for integration. Cook's isn't for communism. Cook's isn't even for anti-blacks. Cook's blueprint is for Africa. And Cook's blueprint is the unknown blueprint that was the basis of black power as we know it today. When you say buy black, you're talking about Cooks. When you say black is beautiful, you're talking about Cooks. When you say Malcolm got something right, you're talking about Cooks. But Cook's blueprint was lost. And Whitey is hiding that blueprint behind a $1,000 paywall. He's hiding solutions from you, telling you you need to take out a small loan to get the information that can liberate you. Whitey does not want you to have solutions to your problems, but you need solutions. You need power. I will give you the Carlos A. Cooks Reader, valued over $1,000 at a 98% discount of $15. Send $15 to cash.me/$ABS only with the subject Carlos and your email address, and I'll send you the ebook. We need power. You need blueprints. Start building today.
Greetings, family. This is Koku, host of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. In case you didn't know, we have an online book club called the Bitter Medicine Book Club. Every month, we will select a book to inspire the Bitter Medicine Podcast listening audience to read along together. At the end of the month, we will have a call-in show and book discussion. This is a great, dynamic way for readers to not only enjoy a book, but also have others to bounce ideas off of. They say if you want to keep anything away from black people, put it in a book. Don't allow this to be true. Head over to bittermedicineblogs.com and subscribe to our newsletter for important updates. Do that today. Join our reading collective today and empower yourselves, your family, and your community. Peace and blessings.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
I'm Molefe Kete Asante, the international organizer for Afrocentricity International. We are at the Molefe Kete Asante Institute. Afrocentricity International is a global Pan-African organization. We see ourselves as a vanguard organization bringing into existence African consciousness. Afrocentricity International was modeled on the basis of the organization created by Marcus Garvey, the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League. We have chapters in many parts of the world, almost in every continent, with the exception of Antarctica. We believe that it is necessary to have political power, economic power, and spiritual power. So our organization has these chapters that are devoted to this aim. We say unity is our aim, victory is our destiny.
So although we are modeled after the UNIA, we have specificity in the sense that for us it's very important to preserve African culture. we have internalized all this negativity about who we are and about our spirituality in particular, to the point that those of us who practice African traditions, African spirituality, we often find ourselves ostracized socially, economically, if not outright rejected by our own family and our own community.
They got together and swore a pact to the devil. They said, we will serve you if you'll get us free from the French. It's a true story. And so the devil said, okay, it's a deal. And they kicked the French out. You know, the Haitians revolted and got themselves free. But ever since, they have been cursed by one thing after the other, desperately poor.
Yeah, there are no voodoo schools. How come?
It's not financed by anybody.
Right.
Not by the states.
All the Christian schools are, almost every one of them are financed by outsiders. And so I guess it's hard to find outsiders to finance a voodoo school.
Absolutely, because again, same thing. The voodoo population is the poorest. If you were voodooist and not Catholic, nobody gets into school because you had to convert.
If we're to reclaim our heritage, we need to preserve our culture. And a large part of that is creating the spaces for us to practice it without, fear of judgment or retaliation or ostracization.
We adamantly believe that our people need to be re-educated and reoriented to learn about the fundamental worthiness of our own ancestral beliefs and practices.
African people are being attacked on all fronts, spiritually, economically, culturally. So the question becomes, where do we go? To whom do we turn? And how do we combat this?
We chose Ivory Coast, Africa as the first location for our grassroots wellness center because it's currently the place in Africa that has the largest cathedral on the continent. To date, we've raised roughly $60,000. We've used about 40 of that to purchase land. The next phase of the project, we're looking to kick off a campaign to raise another $250,000 to finish the construction. And discussing the importance of this fund, currently there is no fund that exists that is put together for the sole purpose of preserving the culture of African people.
Here's the thing. The redemption of Africa depends actually on the redemption of our culture. And that depends on you. It depends on all of us. We have to be involved in the process of giving and supporting our institutions. And the aim of Afrocentricity International is to bring about this redemption, but to bring about it on the terms of African people themselves. African people who are conscious, who are visionary, who have a sense of the future, and who know that nothing can stop us. Unity is our aim, and victory, we know, is our destiny.
Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I'm your host, Koku, and I'm joined today by Wahida. And that video clip you just heard, Sister Wahida was actually in that clip. And if you want to see that video clip, go to reclaimyourheritage.fund, F-U-N-D. reclaimyourheritage.fund. I made the mistake of typing reclaimyourheritage.com and was confused because I couldn't find anything, but it's actually .fund. Sister Wahida, welcome back on the program. Let's talk about the fund. We got some information in that video, but I want to hear from you. Tell us about the fund and tell us how we can help.
Yes. So the Reclaim Your Heritage campaign, as you said, was launched on the 25th of November. That was in conjunction with the Umoja Karamu event that we held. And with regard to what we're doing with the fund, basically, as you saw in the video, we are coming together to pool our resources to build and erect an institute there in Ivory Coast. We chose Ivory Coast or Côte d'Ivoire because there they have the largest cathedral representing the Christian faith on the continent. You saw how it looked and a little glimpse of that. And we need to be able to fund our own institutions. We know what that means and what comes with that. When we do that, we will be able to disseminate the information necessary to the community. They will be able to train and orient people so that they can increase intellectually their consciousness. We'll be able to make micro loans to businesses to spur business growth in the area. We'll be able to implement other initiatives in that community there so that they can thrive on their own. I believe it was Thomas Sankara who said, that we shouldn't have our hands out constantly for help. And part of his entire philosophy was self-determination and self-sufficiency so that we wouldn't be manipulated and exploited by the oppressors. And so by building this institute, it means so much more than just a place of spiritual solace and understanding, but a place where we can economically and, intellectually work for the people in the community. And so once that is up and thriving, and again, we'll be able to continue to work and build more and erect more. So the fund, we are in the first 100 days campaign, which means we're looking for 1,000 people to donate $100 to the fund. Now, of course, if you don't have $100, you can donate whatever it is you can, $5, $10, $50. And if you go on the site, you will see that you can even do a recurring donation. Maybe you can't do $100, but you can do $5 a month. Anything that you can will help. And, I want people to understand that in the month of December, actually Black folks donate the most out of any other race. And when we do that, we do the majority of the donations at the end of the year in December. And I'd like people to really think about how and what it is they put their money to when they donate. A lot of it doesn't go to anything that's going to benefit Black people, whether it's, your neighbor or you or people who are like you on the other side of the world. A lot of it just goes to waste. And that's my opinion from what we see about a lot of organizations, nonprofit organizations and donor organizations. But here we actually have a purpose that's greater, and I want people to think about how they can help and what they can do. If you can't donate money, then donate your time. Go and organize and build in your community. If there's, besides surviving, working and taking care of your children, or, whatever it is that you need to do to survive. Other than that, the next step is, coming together for us to do something for our people to better our situation here and abroad, to better, put us in a position to combat the oppressors, combat the enemies that we have. So organize, do things, gather like-minded people together if you can't donate. But that's what we're doing with the first 100 days campaign. And we will have other campaigns. I want people to also understand this isn't some, GoFundMe one-time stop thing. It's going to be a continuous fund so that we can continue to grow and build indefinitely until, we have an institute everywhere. Everywhere you see a church, everywhere you see a mosque, there needs to be an institute where people can go and practice their African spirituality. And we can go without conditions. As you saw in the video, right? The Mambo there was talking to the CNN representative, and she said that it's conditional. Yeah. You have to convert in order to get these benefits or get access to education, get access to what have you. And that's very detrimental to us. So our assistance and aid has always been conditional. It's always been exploitative. So think about that when you're deciding on how you can help, what you can do. What you can do is help support institutions that aren't going to be conditional for your survival, conditional for your education, conditional for your health and wellness of your community. It's going to be a safe haven for people to go and re-explore African spirituality, to understand what's going on. I think a lot of people, the conversation we had previously, right, about the issue in the Americas right now with descendants of slaves in the movement. One of the things I wanted to say was that even on the African side, so to speak, the continental side, there's a lot of miseducation, and it fuels and feeds that descent from the American side, right? Mm-hmm. And so these spaces are going to be, because a lot of them, they don't understand the history. They don't understand a lot of things, unfortunately. And that's where the learning has to take place. So a lot of them have to go and learn and research about all of the things that we in America, we have access to. A lot of us, there's a lot of conscious people, a lot of people who have studied, but there's just a lot of people who haven't and aren't aware of the history on both sides of the Atlantic, aren't aware of the history of what's happened in America. They aren't aware of the diabolical nature that is the United States and how evolved the oppression is here. So when they come here, they think a lot of times there's a lot of disparity when Africans from the continent or the diaspora may come here. They don't want to associate with Americans. They think, and that's placed there. That social exclusion has been placed there for a reason, and there are reasons that people think this way, and it's because of a lack of education. They don't understand what has happened in America fully to embrace and appreciate the struggle that U.S. blacks have went through here. And then also the position that U.S. blacks we have here from an educational standpoint, a connectivity standpoint, the ability to move and travel. If you take some people from the ghetto here and compare the opportunity of what they could do, and I know some people's arguments will say, that gets into some other things, but you are able to do a lot of things that some people in the poorest of an African continental community there just simply cannot do. They're not going to be able to do it. We have opportunity here. And that's part of the reason why we've always sort of been considered the vanguard, right, of Pan-Africanism. That's why Pan-Africanism was created in America, because it came out of an era where people were very much interested in self-improvement and education. They were eager to come together. Think about after 1865 when slaves were freed, right? You had people running around for a little while. There was a period of time where it wasn't really sure what to do. Eventually, black people started coming together. Black people started to care about being educated. They needed education to get ahead. And they started coming together. So they were in a right position to do the things that they did during Marcus Garvey's era, to be able to flourish and come together as a community, to donate to their organizations, to build and grow. And then, as we said previously, a lot has happened since, the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century there. A lot has happened between then. And the oppressors got much more intelligent and evolved. Mm-hmm. And I think in today's world, they know that Americans are very capable and in a very good position to do a lot for Pan-Africanism. So boom, next thing you know, you got all these people saying, well, I don't want to associate with Africa all of a sudden. It's for a reason. Yeah. Because they know that Americans are in a very good position to be able to do a lot globally, as opposed to, the little boy in Cameroon or something like that. Not saying that, I'm not trying to say anything about Cameroon. I'm just throwing that out there as an example where people in disadvantaged communities there are in a very different position than the disadvantaged communities here. There's still access and opportunity, even in the worst conditions here. Mm-hmm. And that's just a fact, okay? Mm-hmm. So when we talk about these institutions, just know that what's going on in Africa right now, you have this conscious community of people that are waking up to this colonialism, neo-colonialist, the practices that have been occurring. And they're in a very right position they want connectivity, they want access, they want opportunity. They're ready to take that on, right? Sort of similar to where we were a century ago. Mm-hmm. And And so I think that this institution starting there means a lot because we're going to see how it's going to grow and thrive and what it's going to do, and we're going to replicate that. And I just want, people to understand that to think about what it means in a greater scale, not just yourself, because it may not immediately affect you, but it will. You just may not be able to see that yet. And that's why I think that comes back to that individual versus communal thinking that we study about, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it was our ancestor, Sheikh Anta Diop, he very much laid out that sort of northerner versus southerner and all the ideals and thinking that come with that. We have to get back to that so we can think in a community sort of sense instead of an individualistic sense, I, and me. You're not going to get ahead. Our people aren't going to get ahead thinking in terms of I and me. We'll get ahead thinking in terms of us and we. And we'll be very powerful when that day comes. And so just basically saying to think about those concepts and think about why it is you think the way you do in terms of unity and building, and think about why those descendants of slaves sort of movements are there. If as a conscious person, it's very clear that is a dissenting thing to hold back that vehicle that's been moving. It's been moving now for a long time. And it's weird to me that they think that way, going back on that. I'm sorry, but during the commercial break, I had all these other thoughts I was thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird to me that, Pan-Africanism started in all of the intellectuals and revolutionaries. All of them just about all of them, sorry to be clear, just about every one of them was a Pan-Africanist, yes? They understood what it was going to take in the long run, in the future. And then, so it's weird that you have this sect of American, that there's this very Americanism, very Americanized towards thinking where it, completely goes against everything all of their intellectual predecessors were teaching.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how they sit there and quote certain people, but have the thought process that they do. And that's got to be, to me, when you talked about closing ranks, for me, that's very clear for me that that's a closed rank type of situation where you're not seeing the solution in the long run. So I see you as, an operative, an opposition to Black success and Renaissance, in my opinion.
I agree.
So just more about the fund again. We did have some grassroots, donations and organizing, and that's where they were able to purchase the land. So we already broke ground. It's already there, and sectioned off for us. They put two temporary structures, as you saw in the video. There's two temporary structures there, just, sort of so that they can start working and organizing in those structures. But the rest of the money for that particular initiative and institute would be to actually build the temple. And they had that blueprint there, I believe, in the video as well. So, that's already underway. And we want to get everyone involved however they can, however they're able to.
Well, I'll tell you a few things. I'll be giving $100 on behalf of the podcast. Those of you,
thank you so much, brother.
There's not a problem. For those of you listening, you don't have to give 100. Give what you can. Like Marcus Garvey once said, if you have a shilling or 25 cents to give away before you give it to other charities, like the Red Cross, see that all other Negro charities are first attended to. So long as there is a need in your race, attend to it first and always. Never deny help to your own race. And that's something that it seemed like our people once understood, but we've kind of forgotten it. And in fact, to be honest, I don't know, like the American DOS thing, I don't know that that's not one of these backed initiatives from white folks, to be honest. Like Black Lives Matter was backed by some Jewish guy, Soros. I'm not certain, I'm not uncertain either of whether that's a backed thing and it's done to, confuse us, it's done to cause division between us. But I guess that will be seen sometime in the future. What I want to really talk about in this segment is your fund. And what I want to say to the listeners, and you guys have heard me say this before when I interviewed Kepra L from Melanated Conscious Society, like, when you have folks in your community who are organizing, who are having intellectual conversations concerning being more organized, building, producing, doing, the best thing you can do is ask, how can I help? Sometimes we don't have the money to be able to put up. I understand that. But you can ask, how can you help? I mean, maybe there's something you can do if you're a graphic designer, if you're a website builder, if you're a podcaster, if you're, whatever it is, there's something you can do. I don't want to take away from what Sister Wahida is talking about in terms of giving actual money to the fund, but I'm just saying that in addition to giving money to the fund, however much money you can also give your services. If you're in the Philadelphia area, you could give your presence. You can attend the meetings and add your thoughts to what it is they're discussing. Sister Wahida, the Bitter Medicine podcast has a think tank that the goal of the think tank is to work on an African-centered curriculum. And I know others have given blueprints to African-centered curriculums. I know others have African-centered curricula, but I think that everything that we do as a people, as humans really, should be updated. And I think, the goal of this think tank, and it's a WhatsApp group, by the way. If you want access, just let me know. I'll give you access to the group.
Definitely.
But we're trying to build something that can supplement the education system for African children here in America, but all of the diaspora, right? And the goal of the curricula is to reconnect African children with their community and their African tradition. And interestingly enough, this last week or so, a gentleman joined from Tanzania originally. And when I asked him, what's the education system in Tanzania, I was kind of surprised. His answer was, well, they teach stuff from slavery, much like what we see in the Caribbean and what we see here in America. And I was a little bit surprised by that because we've had scholars, we've had Chancellor Williams, we've had the Guyanese scholar whose name is slipping me right now. We've had scholars who have retraced the steps. And Walter Rodney, who have retraced the steps and who can tell you what life was in Africa hundreds, thousands of years ago, right? It's surprising to me to see that the governments in Africa, these African governments and education systems, still only teach its populace history starting with slavery. I find that amazing to me, So we really need to bridge that gap and break down that barrier and go back and teach the continental African, the Caribbean African, the American African. We got to teach them, that we're more than just slavery. I think that's one of the first things we need to do. So it's good to see that there's an organization such as the one you're linked to that is concerned with education, intellectualism, and African spirituality. I think that's something that's lost.
Absolutely. And to speak on that note, I will say Afrocentricity, and like our chapter, right? We are working, we're actually putting it together right now as we speak. Basically, curriculums for the pillars. And what that means is we're going to, people who come on board, they're going to go through these different curriculums. And then, through that process, that we'll know, how serious they are, for one thing. And two, they'll be able to re-educate themselves and reorient themselves. So this is something that will be replicated across all the chapters. So all of those institutes would then be somewhat teaching a very similar, maybe it might be different languages or what have you, but you'll have a curriculum to help across all of the chapters teach very different aspects of our history, the world history, really, right? Because African history is world history.
Yeah.
But they don't teach that because it comes from the vantage point of the oppressors, and that starts when they got there. And maybe they're not even going to teach you what happened when they got there, right? They're going to teach you some stuff starting after that,
right,
and teach you their history, which is, of course, very limited in scope because their history is only, started only so long ago.
Right.
So, it is amazing. It's amazing that you have African people in power, and we know those are puppet governments. We understand that. And so we can't rely on them. We have to do it ourselves. That's point blank. So when you were talking about who funds, these initiatives or whatever, well, we could say we're not funded by any white people. We could say that for a fact. We're funded by ourselves and everybody who helps and donates. Matter of fact, the Parat is Dr. Mazama's title. She's the head of the organization.
Okay.
The Parat, she actually pledged her own personal $10,000 worth toward the fund. Because this is all she does. You know what I mean? This is her life's work.
Right.
Her and Dr. Asante. They travel. When you say they're very busy, they're very busy. They're not even in the country half the time. They're organizing all over the place. So for them, this is very serious. And if you see and understand the vision and can act upon that, then it is, appreciated beyond just, thank you. It is something that will go toward a much larger purpose. And we're going to move toward that African Renaissance. If you want to, we already have that vehicle and we're going to improve it. Just like you said, it needs to be updated. Everything needs to be updated. We need to be operating at a level that can compete in the year 2018. And we have all of the resources, especially us here in America.
Yeah.
We just need to be able to work together. I will say, just from the campaign itself, we were able to pay and contract Black people from the web building, the web development, to the video production and editing, to the launch itself. We had Black people who did the catering, did the declaration. Everything that was involved in this from front to back is all African Black people. You know what I mean?
Good to hear.
And when we do these things, that's what we're doing when we come together. You're forced to now. I'm sorry, not forced in a bad way, but forced in a good way. Where we're spending money with each other. Everything from this, from front to back, was in our community. You know what I mean? So, yeah, like I can't speak on how they're educating people elsewhere, but we have to stop worrying about that and educate how we know they should be educated, or at least give them the tools and the information so that they can do that. And we're going to see a huge awakening when you see people on the continent start accessing other information besides, the garbage that they're being funneled into their brain, into their consciousness. You're going to see a huge awakening. We're going to see it all. We're going to watch it happen. And I'm excited because I believe it'll happen in my lifetime. And I can't wait till we get there. And that's what we're moving toward.
Before I give you the floor to give a final call to action before we go, is there anything that you wanted to discuss that we didn't tap into?
I mean, anything and everything. I'm open to all questions, and I'll give you my answer. I can't think of anything in particular off the top of my head, but okay. I'm sure we could talk for hours if you want to, but we have to cut it off somewhere.
Yeah. So, okay, Sister Wahida, I'd like you.
Is there anything you wanted to tap into that we didn't get to?
No, I think. I mean, the aim of this conversation was to really highlight the work that your chapter is doing And the fact that you have this fund and you have this drive going on right now, the first 100-day drive. So that's really what I wanted to focus on. I'd love to have you on again in the future to chop it up about, whatever is going on. But I just wanted to tap into that. And I really wanted this show to be a discussion, like a progression of what it is we really need in Black society, in African society, and then link that to the work that you guys are doing and the fund that you guys have going on right now for the work that you're doing in the continent. So I just want to keep it real concise to that. You know what I mean? But in the future, I'd like to have you on again. I'd like to remain connected, so to speak, and in the future we could speak on various topics in the future. But before we go, Sister Wahida, once again, I'd like you to give a call to action, right, to the listeners. How can they help? In addition to the fund and the current drive, how can they help? As well as give them a call to action on donating to the fund. The floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you again. So my name is Wahida. I'm part of Afrocentricity International. It's a global organization. We have chapters on every continent except for Antarctica. The Reclaim Our Heritage campaign, the initiative is to grow, develop, erect institutions for our benefit, for our people across the world. We would like you to go check out the website, www.reclaimyourheritage.fund. Everything you need to know is in there. Donate whatever you can. If you can donate $100, great. If you can donate $5, great. We appreciate it all just the same. If you want a recurring donation, that's wonderful as well. If, some people can't donate, that's okay. Give your time. Join an organization. Or if you're in the Philadelphia area, come to our chapter meeting. Come join our organization. We would love to have you if you're a like-minded, conscious African individual. If you're not there yet consciously, that's fine. Come and learn and grow and re-educate yourself. We meet every first and third Sunday at 2:30 p.m. If you don't want to join our organization, that's fine. Just join something. Do something that is working towards the betterment and rebirth and renaissance of African people. That means people worldwide. It's going to take a global effort. Our predecessors knew that, and we need to continue their work. The failures or things that have occurred in the past are just lessons. They are lessons for us to continue, to pick up where they left off. So that we can bring honor to them, honor to our ancestors from where we come from, honor to our ancestors who lived and died here. Go back to Africa mentally, spiritually, consciously, physically, if you can, and reconnect back to the source of what we're doing, the source of our people. If get other people involved. If you are a like-minded individual, get your family and your friends involved to do the work that's necessary. We say unity is our aim and victory is our destiny. We believe that consciousness precedes unity. We believe that if we improve the consciousness of our people, we can improve our behaviors. If we improve our behaviors, we will improve our conditions. But it all starts with consciousness, and that's where the learning has to take place. That's where you have to go and do the work, whether that's intellectually, whether that's economically, whether that's spiritually, whether that's politically. Just get involved however you can. This particular fund is meant to build up institutions. And that's what we're looking to do so that we can do the work in and out of those institutions.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. For the listeners, this is another one of those efforts that we should support. I'm pledging my support today, and I hope you guys pledge as well. We can make this happen. We make everything else happen for every other group. Let's make this happen for our group. So, Wahida, before we go, tell the people where they can reach you on social media.
You can definitely follow the fund at AHCP for African Heritage and Cultural Preservation _fund. So that's at AHCP _fund. You can follow Afrocentricity International, our chapter, at AI _Philly, PHILLY. Definitely follow us on Twitter. We're on IG and Facebook. You can search at AI Philadelphia, no underscore in between. Again, AI Philadelphia on Facebook. And you can definitely contact us. We're located at 5535 Germantown Avenue. On the website there at the www.reclaimyourheritage.fund, at the bottom there's a contact site. If you want to send an email, you can definitely email them there. That's different ways you can reach us. Follow, connect, grow, build, however you need to. We're here to, reach out and connect with everyone.
And there you have it, guys. Make sure follow the organization today. Sister Wahida, thank you for appearing on the show today. And I hope that we are able to speak again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. I very much appreciate you.
I appreciate you, too. Thank you very much. To the listeners, this has been another episode of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. We will be back next week with a new episode, so stay tuned for that. Until next time, this has been the Bitter Medicine Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Koku. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bittermedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Bitter Medicine Show, Twitter, Bitter Meds, Tumblr, Bitter Meds, Instagram, Bitter Medicine.